we're talking about the fall, and we're talking about the Enneagram. We're talking about having breakthrough in the areas of our lives where we keep on experiencing broken behavior. So I want you to think about, real quick, what's the number one behavior in your life that no matter how hard you've tried, you've worked on it, you keep finding yourself doing it? So Paige, what's yours?
Mine is constantly keeping track of the mistakes and failures anytime I make a single mistake.
So for our framework today, we're going to call that a fixation, something that I just find myself continuing to fixate on as a behavior. For me, it's worry. I think about that Ray LaMontagne song, worry, 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 worry. And I think he says something like, worry keeps following me since the day I was born. That's me. No matter how hard I've tried to trust Jesus for things, the dominant story in my life, a dominant behavior in my life has been fixating through worry. So now that we've identified our fixation, or that thing that we've previously called sin and maybe associate with shame, and we feel bad about it because we can't control it, what I've experienced in most Christians' lives is that they focus on that. They actually fixate on fixation, if that makes sense. And they try to manage it, they try to change it, they try to fix it, and they muster up all this effort to appear to be good, right? So that they feel good about themselves and maybe prove to God that they're worth loving. That's unhealthy. That leads to more brokenness. That leads to just pushing the problem down the road and it leaking out later on. And instead of doing that approach, we want to talk about sin as sickness. And just like we treat any sickness, we want to get to the source of it rather than just treat the symptoms. And so we see this in reestablishing our foundation with the gospel, is that during the fall in Genesis 3, what we see is that sin starts from something happening. Adam and Eve had this thing happen, and in that story, we see our own story where they believed lies that led to fears, that led to things, and that led to this kind of sinful behavior of hiding from God and having these compulsions and hiding in shame. So instead of looking at the symptom and trying to fix the symptom of sin, we want to actually trace it to the root of what's happening behind the scenes and grow an awareness and compassion for that. And so a helpful shape to identify a healthy relationship with looking at our sin is what we call the Enneagram, which is this bad boy right here. And part of what's really helpful with the Enneagram is that instead of looking at our sin as what's wrong with us or what makes us ashamed, it actually tells us a story about how we got here. And so we're going to actually use a visual aid called the virtue map that's from our Enneagram literature. And we're going to do a flow chart of tracing where our sin comes from. I have these handy dandy letters here to help us identify how to get to a healthy relationship of awareness and honesty with our sin. We start with the fixation. We identify, for me, it's worry. And sometimes that happens, to use Enneagram language, it comes out in hyper planning. And so I worry, and so I'm trying to think ahead. And what if this happens? And what if that happens? And I want to make sure I am safe, and then I anticipate anything wrong that could happen, or plan really good things. That's just how I cope. And in my own Enneagram work, in my own gospel story work, I realized that I do that out of a core fear. So that's what this F stands for. And my fear that I will be trapped in pain and deprivation. So my fear is pain and to be deprived of what I need. Man, when I read that rung so true in my heart and my life. Like, yeah, I'm trying to avoid pain. That's why I plan. That's why I worry. I don't want to be deprived of what I need. So we keep doing the virtue map work and realize the fear comes from somewhere, that it comes from actually a healthy desire. So I'm getting some compassion. I'm afraid because I desire or I long for something that's good. For me, in my 7 story, my desire is to be satisfied. I want my needs to be met. I want my longings to be met. And I want to feel safe and provided for, satisfied. In the virtue map, again, we're trying to get to the root of this. We're trying to grow in awareness and compassion so that we can actually be healed of what's going on behind the scenes. So now I know my desire, I go up to the wound. Ooh, you get it. So something happened, or a series of things happened in an important time in your life, usually when you're a child, where something harmful happens and you cope with what's below. For me, my wound as a 7 is abandonment, and you'll find that in the story in the book. So I'm just going to mark it down here. I felt abandoned and neglected and not really taken care of. What was lost for me in that wound is that I lost the sense that that I'll be taken care of, which sucks, right? As a kid, you should feel that, and so I grieve that as part of my story. What's lost, or what the lie that I believed in that wound as a kid, is that, I'll look at my table here, that it's not okay to depend on anyone. I can't depend on people. So it's starting to make sense. Okay, something happened in my childhood, or a series of things happened. I felt abandoned. I felt like I lost that sense of safety that I was taken care of. And the lie that I believe is I can't depend on people. And so now I'm growing compassion for little Daniel, young Daniel. And because I can't depend on people, I desire to be safe and have my needs satisfied. And so out of that desire, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm not going to get that. And I'm afraid of pain. I'm afraid of not getting my needs met and being deprived of having that feeling again. And so what I did is I put on a persona. The Greek for persona means mask. I put on this mask that, okay, I'm going to fixate on planning. I'm going to fixate on anticipating when my needs are not going to be met. And I'm going to work so hard. And I'm going to make the best and most wise decisions. And that's a strength, right? That's a good thing. But when we're unhealthy and when we're wounded, we overdo it. And so for me, I end up stressing and planning and worrying and being anxious. And that takes the good things and tarnishes them, it poisons them, and makes it really hard, where I can't stop doing that thing because I've relied on that to survive. So when we do this work, and when we trace our behaviors to the core fear and the core desire and the core wound, we start growing in not only compassion for the things that we keep doing. And that leads us to our next point. We're thinking gospel-centered, right? And so we actually want to trace, we don't actually start with the wound. That's not the first chapter of our story. We start with the virtue. What was good about us? So for me, now I'm growing in compassion, and I go to the root of how I was made uniquely good. And as a 7, my virtue, or my holy idea, is that I love wisdom, and I love work. I love to work hard and to plan. That's my other thing, plan. These are my virtues. It's holy wisdom, holy work, holy planning, having a good plan. And so now I can see in my gospel story, this is what's good about me. This is how God made me. It's my true self. But this thing happened to me, and these are the lies I believed. And to be satisfied and to avoid pain, that's how I cope. And what this does now is I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not believing lies about who God is and how the world is unsafe. I'm encountering God in these things. And this is the work of the Enneagram, is we're identifying these things and then filling these lies with truth. For me, my process is actually I can depend on God. I can depend on an abundant creation. I can depend on people to a healthy extent. And so I'm rewiring my heart, rewiring my brain, putting myself around safe people, and I am becoming a healthier person, trusting myself and trusting others. What the Enneagram work has taught us, that for thousands of years, people that care about spirituality and health have kind of noticed about people that have my similar dominant story, is that 7s, when they're stressed, go to the negative or unhealthy characteristics of a 1. And the 1 is the perfectionist. So that's what I do. I'll fixate on planning, and I'll overdo it, and I'll overanalyze, and I'll get paralyzed, and I'll like stress other people out, and I'll be anxious and feel like nothing's ever good enough. And I'll micromanage my wife, my kids, my realtor right now. That's what so for me now, I know, okay, this is a sign that I'm not my healthiest self. I'm not my true self when I'm taking on some of those perfectionistic characteristics. I also know my pathway to health is to the positive characteristics of the 5, which is to take a step back and investigate and reflect and observe. That's what 5s are great at. They're some of the best researchers and analyzers around. So then I know, hey, if I'm wanting to see growth or progress in my life, are these things happening? Are they balancing out some of the negative sides of who I am? That's super helpful. So this is the Enneagram Virtue Map, and your key walkaway here is you want to come away with what's the major lie, and you're healing that with gospel truth. We do that through mantra work and pathway work, and speaking truth where there's lies, and we are cutting the source of that brokenness, that sin, that sickness, where it started, that wound and that lie, and we're placing it gospel truth. And this is how we get healed of sin.